Good afternoon, everybody. I know there's a few people that are yet to trickle in, but I think we'll just get rolling because we're joyfully a little bit behind schedule, but for good reason. So we'll just wait for. I think I'm on the next presentation, and mine will be short, by the way, shorter than I'd even anticipated. So. We talked a little bit about the Human Flourishing Framework, and we talked about how, like fashion, it's never going to be finished. We'll always be looking to broaden it and validate it with more data, and we're very much looking forward to our partners participating in that process. But I did want to talk a little bit about Project Vision, which has a much grander vision. And I should probably start by saying, this vision, we know Humanity 2.0 is not going to be able to do alone, and maybe it won't even be Humanity 2.0 to actually deliver on some of these things I'm going to share. We just felt, upon reflection, someone needed to do this work, and it comes back to trying to make the work that we're doing practical, getting it off the bookshelves and into the hands of people who can actually innovate and solve problems in the world, and also provide a mechanism for us average run-of-the-muck people to hold people who are in charge of our destinies accountable so that they are delivering on the flourishing which we all want and hope for. So Flourishing Framework version 2, trying to first define human flourishing and then trying to frame it all up. We couldn't move on to the next steps without doing that. And so we feel we've gotten far enough that we can at least take a stab at what's next. Okay, so if we have a human flourishing framework, in theory, we should be able to flip that and create like a human languishing framework, right? So what are the things that are preventing human beings from flourishing? And I'll just say from the get-go, obviously those are innumerable, and we know that. But maybe this is more of a conviction than true, but there's certainly some problems are more important than others. And so if we gave ourselves the task of figuring out what the greatest impediments to human flourishing are, we could first map them, identify them, and map them, then at least we would have an idea of what we're up against. This visual is an expression that Father Ezra and I worked on a few years ago. The idea was, how do you go about determining what are the most important problems? Well, there's a whole bunch of different ways to approach that. One might be how much a particular problem affects or is the cause of other problems. So that might be one way of zeroing in on those problems which are most important. And so think of an example. Let's say the family. I think most people would agree families not working out are a pretty big problem. And I think we all can understand how family not working out, probably because many of us have experienced it, has net effects which happen throughout society. And so we would certainly put the breakdown of the family very high on that list. And so, and this is, I think, the exercise, is what else should be on that list. Once we've mapped these problems, which is going to require partnerships with AI and technical partners, because obviously this work is extremely difficult. It would be a lot of data, but I think ultimately it's worth doing. Once we've mapped a sufficient number of problems, a sufficient number, and we have some understanding of the correlations between those problems, and therefore we're able to see what problems seem to be the most significant, then could we develop a methodology for ranking them, right? And so the idea being that obviously our elected officials and companies have a finite amount of brain power and time. So we can't solve all problems. And maybe that's not even an efficient way to proceed, because maybe not all problems need to be solved if we solve the most fundamental problem. So how do we appropriately focus our attentions on the most important problems? Well, for the first things, we need to determine what those are, and we need a methodology for figuring out what are the most important problems and then ranking them, which will be difficult. But again, I think it's worth doing it. And I think me as a run-of-the-muck guy, I would like to know that, because as a citizen who wants to be actively engaged, who wants to use some of the little influence I have, say voting, I would like to be able to vote in accordance with some good data about objectively what are the most important problems in the world. And that way, when a politician's selling me on these issues being the most important, I can kind of take a look and say, well, that's not what the data is saying. I'd like to hear you talk about other issues. And if you're not willing to, then maybe you're not going to get my vote. So part of this is about trying to engage and empower the citizenry around the world, provide them with good, solid information and data about the things which matter to them the most so that they can actively participate in civil society. So once we've mapped the impediments and developed this methodology for ranking them, we create this ranked impediments list. Okay, so now we have, in theory, a list of the most important problems, and hopefully we can use things like Humanity 2.0 to figure out who is the most apt actor to solve those problems. Some of those problems, it may make sense for a government to take on. Some of those problems, it may make sense for an NGO to tackle, and some of those problems might be best handled by the private sector. But of course, we can't invite those respective actors to participate in this process of solving the problems if we don't invite them to participate. And so, part of this is about making sure that we're bringing together, as Humanity 2.0 was initially conceived to do, is bring together the public, private, and the faith sector to look at problems and make sure that we're kind of deviling up the work amongst the respective groups so that we're all actively collaborating, but always towards a clearer end than we have now. And I talked about in the beginning here about accountability. I want, as a citizen, to be able to hold my government accountable. And to do that, I need to have good information. And one of the ways that we hypothesize you could potentially do this is if you know what the most important problems are, you know what flourishing is, you know what the most important problems are, and we have kind of understanding what are the most important problems, then we should have the ability to kind of look at different stratas of society and determine in what areas people are flourishing and in what areas they're not. And being able to provide transparency and accountability to regular citizens as to where the government is succeeding and where it's failing is kind of key. And so we kind of see the Human Flourishing Index as an accountability mechanism, where we're providing people information about ways they're winning and ways they're losing, and then inviting the citizens to set an agenda with their political representatives, or in the sake of a company, setting a corporate policy or a certain corporate strategy to make sure that we're focusing on trying to do better than we are now. So trying to move ourselves up through that index. Ireland, by the way, is at the very top of that list, and that's very heartening to see that. But that list is completely arbitrary. So anyways, with that, that's where we think this work could go. Now, there's a whole bunch of other places this work could go. These are just a few key steps that we felt would be necessary in order to ensure that the work is actually going to be useful. And so anyways, I just want to encourage people, I know we will in a subsequent conversation, but when you leave here, first to think about these particular ideas, and if you have other ideas about how we could take this Human Flourishing insight and make it useful and more effective at solving the world's problems, to please enter into conversation with us. Okay, thank you. And with that, I'm going to hand things over to Tim Lomas, who's going to lead. It's going to have a few remarks, and then we'll lead our next panel.